This is the first in a three-part series of videos on note-taking. We're going to talk about listening today. In the next video, we'll talk about actually taking notes. And in the third of the three videos, we'll give you some additional tips that can help out with the ideas of note-taking and active listening, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, what is note-taking? It simply is a way to record what's going on in class. It's a combination of writing down things your instructor says, things your instructor puts on the board. It's an active learning process because it's engaging you in listening, selecting, and organizing information. You have to listen, determine what is important, select that information out, and then organize it and put it down on paper. Ultimately, this process helps you comprehend and retain the material that your instructor is attempting to teach you. So the hardest part about note-taking is that it involves a complex compromise between really two very different states. It's possible to sit back, watch, and listen to everything that goes on in the classroom, never write anything down. It's also possible to just simply try to record everything that's being written on the board and that your instructor is saying, and not really spending any time processing it and determining what's important and what's not. Ideally, you'll do a combination of these two things. You'll spend time watching and listening, and you'll spend time recording things. But while you're watching and listening, you'll be listening for those things that are most important, and those are the things you'll be attempting to write down. So, in order to be a good note taker, you first have to be a good listener. You have to be able to listen to what your instructor is saying and determine what is important. So, active listeners, and we say active here because you are not just passively taking in information, but you are actively thinking about what you are hearing and trying to decide what is important, trying to maybe connect that information to other things, choosing what to write down. That's where the active part comes in. You're going to listen for organizing ideas, you're going to listen for important details, you're going to listen for connections that your instructor may give you. And it's important that you don't anticipate where your instructor is going, because then you're thinking about not what's going on, but what you think is going to be going on. So try as much as possible to not anticipate where your instructor's headed. To help with the process, before class, it's a good idea to review notes from previous classes, figure out what is it that we have been doing. It's also a good idea to review homework problems that you've been working on, and ask yourself, how am I doing with the homework? Do I understand what we're doing? Am I prepared for quizzes and tests? You may want to read or at least scan any new material that you're going to be looking at in advance. You've got a textbook, you generally know what your instructor is going to cover. That will give you a first experience with it, so it's not entirely new when you see it in class. It also gives you an idea of where you're going, gives you an opportunity to activate prior knowledge that you may have about the material. While you're in class, it's a good idea to make sure you're sitting someplace where you can clearly hear your instructor. You may want to sit closer to the front if they are a quiet speaker. Again, you don't want to anticipate what your instructor is going to say. You also don't want to judge it. You don't want to think of things as being good or bad. You're just trying to decide, is it important or not? And if you want to think of that as judging, that's fine. But that's all that you really want to do, is just kind of stay in the moment. Think about what your instructor is saying and decide what is important for you to record. So you're going to listen for main ideas, you're going to listen for organizing information, you're going to watch out for that stuff too on the board. If you've already looked at some material in advance, you already have an idea of what main ideas and organizing structure is, so that can help out a lot. Always listen for verbal cues from your instructor. We'll talk in a little bit more detail about this in a bit, but your instructors often give you lots of different kinds of hints about what is important and what you should be making sure you're capturing in your notes. So, in terms of the active listening part of the process, it helps if you have reviewed your notes and if you have pre-read the text. These activities will help you choose main ideas, important information, because you've already seen some structure, and you already have an idea of what those main ideas are. You're going to make sure you're listening for the most important words. Your instructor will give you cues about these things. You'll see words that you've already seen earlier in the course, or if you've pre-read the material for the lecture coming up. And again, those verbal cues from your instructor are really important. We're going to take a closer look at those in just a moment. So instructors will say things like, this step is difficult or tricky. They might say things like, students often get this wrong, or you can expect to see this on the test. That's pretty overt. Or they might say something like, make sure you know this. There's lots of other things they say, and different instructors will say different things. It's important to learn as quickly as possible the types of cues your instructor gives and use them as a way to determine that information is important and should be written down. Pauses, times when your instructor is quiet, are also really important. When your instructor pauses, they're often trying to give you time to think about something they've said, or write something they've said down, or maybe even a little bit of both. But they generally pause for a reason, and it's good to notice those pauses as well as the verbal cues they give through the words that they say. Another instructor cue is repetition. If your instructor says the same thing multiple times throughout a class, or even the same thing multiple times in a row, they're trying to get your attention and let you know that information is important. And finally, listen for your instructor to summarize things. Won't always write them down, and they won't always necessarily be obvious. Your instructor won't always say, okay, in summary. But if you've been paying attention and you have an idea of what the main ideas and topics are and the structure and organization of the material, you'll notice those summaries. And that's a good time to listen to what is your instructor summarizing, what are they telling you is important. During a lecture, you will miss information. You just won't hear it. You will also misunderstand things. So when you miss something, raise your hand, ask your instructor to repeat it. If there's something you don't understand, ask your instructor to explain more. Try to tell them exactly what it is that you don't understand, if at all possible. Help them understand your misunderstanding, if you will. But don't be afraid in either of these situations to ask questions. Your instructor is looking for these things in most cases, looking for these kinds of questions, because they help tell them what it is that students may not be grasping. And instructors don't expect that just because they're saying and writing it down on the board that you are immediately understanding it all and that the learning has happened. Instructors know that the learning is a much more complicated and involved process than that. And they need cues from you to help them understand when you or others in the classroom need additional help, need more explanation, need something repeated. So in summary, note-taking is a process that begins before class. We talked about things you can do to prepare to take better notes. Active listening is an important part of note-taking. It's not just about writing things down, but it's about that active listening and trying to determine what is important to write down. And it requires finding an efficient way to deal with the compromises between just sitting there and listening and not really listening much at all in terms of actively listening, but just simply recording things down and writing everything down. Again, you want to find that balance, that area in the middle that allows you to capture what's important and do some learning along the way at the same time.